Okay, so I think we are live. Welcome to the second panel on the second day of our conference, From the Sea to the City, Cities for Welcoming Europe. Some of our panelists are joining us from Brussels, from Amsterdam, and from Bologna. And Professor Gesine Schwan and myself, we are in Palermo, so I hope our internet connection will be stable throughout the meeting. We are very happy to have such a very interesting and impressive panel with a lot of experts. We have Katharina Bamberg from Eurocities joining us. She is the policy advisor for migration and integration at Eurocities, the leading network of major European cities. She's responsible for the network's policy work, all of it related to migrant integration and diversity in cities. And she also manages the City Working Group on Migration and Integration, and also the exchange between these cities. Researching issues related to the common European asylum system, resettlement, relocation, so a real expert on these issues. And she has a master's degree in global migration from University College of London and a bachelor's degree in European Studies from Maastricht University. A governance platform and the co-chair of the Leadership Council of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network in Germany. And besides her scientific career, she has collaborated in numerous political committees. She's chairing the Commission of Fundamental Values for the Social Democrats in Germany, and she was nominated twice as a candidate for the office of the Federal President of Germany in 2004 and 2008. And then we have Mark Boekwijt. I hope I pronounce your last name correctly. He is the EU representative for the city of Amsterdam and coordinates the Inclusion Partnership. He's based in Brussels, and he will tell us, because he will be the first speaker, a bit more about himself and the project he's working on in a minute. Then we have Inti Bertocchi. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Thank you. He's the scientific coordinator at the New Citizenship and Districts area at the municipality of Bologna. And interestingly, he started his career as an engineer and as an urban planner in the urban planning department, and has worked in different parts of the city of Bologna at the sustainability office, in the environment department, at the Innovation of Housing Policies Office, and at the Institute for Social Inclusion. So we are very happy to have you here. He's currently the head of the Networking and Community Building Office at the Savina district, and he promotes community care and social innovation, collaborating with the civil society and third sector organizations. I'm very happy to start this discussion today on creating welcoming cities with direct EU funding. Yesterday, I think we had very interesting thoughts from different European cities, and it became really clear how much cities are already doing in different parts of Europe, but also how much is still they need to be getting more a seat at the table. And so one part of doing this is this demand of cities getting more access to European funding so that they can also be able to do more, especially when it comes to migrant reception and inclusion. And we're very happy to hear from Mark now about the Inclusion Partnership program, and also how you work together with the European Commission, what has been the development, and give us a bit more of context, because this demand is out there, but many people don't know that the European Commission is actually already working very closely with cities. So we would be very interested how the new partnership came about and what you are doing in this regard.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Malisa, for that introduction. Thanks for the invitation. And to start with, apologies. Indeed, I have to leave this meeting at around 12:30. It's kind of raining birthday parties here for kids. I don't know. They all seem to be having birthday parties before the summer. Anyway, so. My name is Mark Boekwijt, indeed. I work for the city of Amsterdam. I'm based in Brussels. I'm the liaison officer, if you will, between European priorities that are relevant to Amsterdam and vice versa. In 2000, by the way, I should maybe reiterate the support our city gives to the declaration that was adopted yesterday in the meeting. Our deputy mayor could not be there, but we are fully supporting the goals of the declaration. And actually, we have been together with Eurocities, we have been advocating for very much the same principles of more European solidarity in vis-a-vis the migration situation in Europe. Maybe in that same spirit, we started working closer together with the European Commission in 2016 in what is named a partnership on the inclusion of migrants and refugees. And we do so in quite a special environment, in the sense that we work not only with the Commission, but we also work with member states. And we include in that same partnership networks such as the one that Katharina is working for, Eurocities, and also the Council of European Municipalities and Regions, the CMR, which is an umbrella organization also. So we reach out to different levels of governance on the issue of inclusion. What we do is we come together and develop an action plan that we work on also together. In the previous phase of the partnership, we are now in a second phase. We have a new action plan, but in the previous phase of 2016-2020, we also have been working on, for instance, the issue of better access to financial means for cities, or the issue of direct funding. We have managed to produce, in agreement with all the parties that I just mentioned, including the member states that were on the table, commonly adopted or agreed recommendations that were then sent to, for instance, stakeholders in the Parliament and the Council. And this has led also to some openings in the AMIF fund, for instance, and also we have tried to influence kind of the priorities in that funding. For instance, that there's more attention for the issue of unaccompanied minors or children in migration. So we've been working on that in the previous action plan. Now we have 7 actions. I will just mention briefly them, and then I will focus on the financial instruments one. So we have an action on culture. How can cultural institutions contribute to inclusion of migrants? We have 2 actions on health, one on access to health services in general, from the point of view of migrants. What do we see happening? What are best practices? What are bottlenecks? And we have also a dedicated action on the issue of mental health and migration. We all know that the issue of mental health is an important one, given the particularities of the people we're talking about and their history. So then we have a dedicated action again on better protection of children in migration, in particular unaccompanied minors. We will be looking there into bottlenecks in cross-border cooperation between, in particular, member states, but also multi-stakeholder analysis in that sense. We do that action closely with an NGO called Missing Children Europe. And then the 3 other actions are the issue of LGBTQ+ within the migrant community or refugee community. We have a dedicated action on better data collection, better data development between European, national, and local stakeholders. And the last one is indeed one on financial instruments. Each of these actions has an action leader. It can be someone from the Commission, it can be someone from a member state or a city. The one on financial instruments, maybe I should mention the members in our partnership. From the member states, it's Italy, Portugal, Malta, and Belgium. And in Belgium, it's the region of Flanders. From city side, we have Berlin, Barcelona, Helsinki, Budapest, Mechelen, apart from Amsterdam also, of course. The Commission is, DG Home is our co-coordinator, DG Emplo Joint Research Center. And we have, as I mentioned, Eurocities and the CMR. And then we have European Investment Bank and the Council of Europe and the Council of Europe Development Bank. So that's kind of the parties that we have at the table. And on financial instruments, this action is not advocating more money for cities. It is that's not on the table. What is on the table? There's a lot of financial instruments that are not well used or can be better used by local authorities. And this action is precisely about this. We will bring together experts from the different financial instruments at the European Investment Bank, European Investment Fund, and also the Council of Europe Development Bank. And then we will work with them, sharing in particular practices where these instruments have been used for social infrastructure funding. And we will analyze that, and we will learn from that and create a learning environment for other cities to engage in the same way, better using these instruments. So, and then we will be working on capacity building and awareness raising. And this action will develop, is now in the first phase. It will develop in the course of the coming year, as well as the 6 other actions. And then by the second half of 2022, we will wrap up, we will evaluate, and we will do our best to disseminate what we have learned in our actions. So that is roughly the work that we're doing. We have a website where more information is available on the actions and where contacts are available. And I would be happy to share that with the organizers.
In the chat. So
is it already in the chat?
You can find it in the chat.
That's excellent. So, you know, this is what cooperation is all about, you know, things go by themselves. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I stop here for a moment if people have questions, or I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Mark. Yes, to the audience listening in, you can post questions either in the chat, I think, or in the Q&A thing, and we will try to answer these questions during our discussions. I would like to turn now to Katharina Bamberg, who works at Eurocities, and that Mark has already mentioned your close cooperation. And so if we listen to Mark, then we see there is already a lot happening, but I would still like to ask you, because Eurocities is advocating for a stronger say of cities in European funding, in the management, but also in the priorities of the funds to have a larger say. So from your perspective, what are the main obstacles towards implementing this demand? Where do you see that there is still a lot of work needs to be done? And maybe you can explain just a bit also for the listeners who are not that familiar with funding and why it matters to cities, a bit more of the context. Thank you. And thank you, Mark, and we will collect the questions.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Melissa. Thank you also, first of all, to the organizers for inviting me to the conference. And also, I think in the beginning, congratulations, because I think the scope and also the cities and civil society representatives that you have brought together, I think that's really quite impressive, and it really gives me a lot of positive hope that we can actually achieve something together. And I think it also really goes to show that there is a lot of leadership at the local level from so many different actors, specifically on this question of welcoming refugees and migrants to our cities. So I think what I would like to do just in a couple of minutes is to zoom out a little bit from the great example that Mark has already given, and to perhaps give you a little bit of an impression of the wider context, and then how we work on the topic of funding as well, of course. So as you have said already, Eurocities, we are the network of the bigger European cities, and we represent the voices of those cities at the EU level. And in that sense, I think we're in quite a good position to really see on a daily basis that there's a lot of innovative approaches and really good practices coming from cities about the integration and inclusion of refugees and migrants at the local level, and also really good initiatives that help to reflect the diversity of local societies. But at the same time, I don't think we have to be surprised about that, because cities being on the ground, they really see the benefits of that diversity, and in that sense, they also want to harness that. So what I find interesting, and I think that also comes out very well in this conference that we're participating in today is that this very positive approach that we see at the local level and the political confidence that comes with that, it also extends beyond the immediate local level, the local context, right? And you can really see that the cities that are active on the issue, they also want to link up transnationally and push their views on that and push their agenda. And in this context, I would like to mention our own Solidarity Cities initiative as well, which perhaps has come up as well in the context. You will know that it was initiated by the city of Athens in 2015 when there was just this increase in the numbers of refugees coming to Europe. And it is an initiative that really gives us space and a context also for mayors to take a stand and to reaffirm that commitment to solidarity and reaffirm that they are open to taking in refugees. And I think that also comes, and here I'm sort of hinting at the big obstacle in the room that we sometimes see. I think that also comes as a consequence of the lack of progress that we see at the national level on that issue specifically, and on that quote unquote fair distribution of responsibility that a lot of the time is sort of the bus race in the EU context as well. But of course, it's very positive to see that then cities are stepping up and really aim to give an opportunity to refugees to come to their cities, build a new life, have a future and a new home. But of course, there's a lot of work and resources involved with that. And I think that's also where now we're coming to the focus of our panel today, because one of the main points of our advocacy has been for years already that cities need to be more involved in the management of EU funds, as you mentioned, Melissa, in the beginning. And here specifically, we also really want to see direct EU funding for cities towards the integration and inclusion of migrants and refugees. Now, why is this important? I think it's very important because we all know that cities' budgets can be tight. And I think that's specifically something that we have seen as well in the whole pandemic situation now with COVID-19, where of course that has really taken on a new urgency, so to say. And I think also beyond the pandemic situation, direct funding would really go a long way in cities that need to rely on national governments that may be reluctant in some cases to use the allocated EU funding that they have at their disposal actually for measures that integrate and include migrants and refugees. And of course, cities cannot afford to wait for that funding to trickle down and to reach them at some point. So that's why it's really important to stress that point about the involvement in funding and indirect funding, ideally as well. So as I said already, sorry?
Sorry, just not everyone might be familiar with these distinction between direct and shared management. Maybe you can explain to the audience just very quickly what you mean by direct funding, because I think maybe that got a bit lost because I didn't introduce that well in the beginning. Thank you, sorry.
No worries. And I mean, we also don't want to make it too technical, right? Because it's really a sort of introduction into the topic, and I don't want to bore people on a Saturday lunchtime with the technicalities of EU funding, but it's pretty much the idea that cities need to be reliant at this point on national authorities programming more or less completely the sort of the goal of where that funding goes, right? And sometimes that just does not relate to the reality that cities see on the ground. So that's where we really want to see that cities can be involved more, directly giving their input into the funding programming, so to say. But if I can just add to that, I mean, I think there is some progress already, and I really also want to stress that because there, of course, with the whole recovery funding now that is happening at the EU level, and also with other initiatives such as the EU Action Plan on Integration and Inclusion, we do see that the Commission, for instance, does recognize cities as key stakeholders in this discussion, and they also want to make it easier for cities to have access to that funding through the involvement in the programming, right? So I think it's already very good that we have that recognition by the Commission and by the specific sort of context where that is discussed, also in the urban partnership, as Mark has mentioned already. But of course, we need to push that a little bit further. And I think a main point there is also the multi-governance aspect, right? So really try to bring together the local level, the regional level, national level, and the EU level in one space to discuss these issues. And there again, I think the urban partnership, as Mark has mentioned already, has been such a good step in the right direction, and we're very happy about that. So I'm running out of time, so let me just finish quickly by saying this is really something we need to keep on the policy agenda, and I think it's really something that we also need to work together across different initiatives. So again, super happy to be here today. Thank you for the invitation, and I'm happy to continue to cooperate.
Thank you so much. And yeah, with these very interesting inputs on the role, and also a bit of the context that you gave, what the direct funding actually means, because it really means that cities have a say, and not only the national governments. I got a very interesting comment from the chat that yesterday one of the mayors said, when nation states fail, cities usually prevail. And that's an excellent comment to give the word to Gesine Schwan. Because Gesine, you have been known to have made this proposition, especially in the context of refugee reception and relocation, to better fund the cities and give them additional funding for their own infrastructure if they would receive more refugees. And so maybe, yeah, with these words of when nation states fail, cities usually prevail, and also the mayor of Athens yesterday said we should not conceive of migration all the time as a burden, but also as an opportunity. But now I see that Mark raised his hand. Mark, do you want to make a quick point before you are having to leave? Gesine, I would ask you to hold on for 1 minute.
I just wanted to react to one of the comments in the chat. So I'm advancing in that technological sense. The question on LGBTQ plus and family reunification, or as it, I thank the Nina for that comment, and I will bring that to our action. We have a specific action dedicated to this group, and I would like to bring that action also as an issue in the work that we will take on. So that's I just wanted to react to that comment. Sorry.
Perfect. So Nien, I think that was Nien Upkes from the city of Utrecht. I hope the question has been addressed, and if not, we can take this up, unfortunately then without Mark, but there are a lot of people in the audience that also know very well about the urban partnership, so maybe they can share some of the positions that are relevant to this question. Thank you, Mark. I know you will stick with us for another 5 minutes, which I would now like to give, and please use just the 5 minutes, Gesine, for your comment regarding regarding your proposal with regard to this European fund that you have been known to make. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Lisa, and also the other participants at that Zoom. In fact, I think one has always to think of funding. I am not a practitioner of municipalities, I have to confess from the beginning. I am just a theoretician, but I had the impression that, and therefore I will speak about some principles of financing. I was very happy when Mark said he would try to contribute that municipalities can make better use of the money. And I think this is essential, especially smaller and medium-sized communities. I think this is really essential. But the other point which is essential is that municipalities which want to welcome refugees would have really an easier way to get the financing of the integration action. That is very clear, and not just to always to go through the national governments. Another principal point for me is the political one, how to withdraw the political right, the possibility to make propaganda out of municipalities or against municipalities which welcome refugees. And the point is, as they very often say, that the money is given for refugees, but not for the real inhabitants of municipalities. I think when one can withdraw, so to say, the base of that so-called argument in saying municipalities which want, by a longer procedure, participative procedure, I would suggest, which want to welcome refugees, that they should not only be refinance the costs of integration, but to the same amount, the financing of additional investments in their municipality, which are in indirect relation, so to say, with the financing of refugees, which are independent on the other hand, or which are really directed for people in the municipalities who have always lived there and who have, so to say, also a claim for justice if they are poor, if they don't have housing, etc. Utrecht has suggested once that, or they have done it, they have made an example that they have financed a new housing, but also new community centers, so to say, which could be used by usual people of the town. And I think this is exactly what we need. We have also now a judgment, judicial judgment about that, or is it a Gutachten, legal assessment about the possibility, if that is legally possible in the European Union, and obviously it is. That means we do not have to change primary laws of the European Union. We can do it, and the direct financing would also make out of Europe a kind of a really concrete and not only rhetoric Europe of citizens, because the communities are the location where citizens commit themselves, where they do themselves, and if they are directly tied to Brussels, this is another legalization or legitimization of the European Union through the citizens. I thought I had the 5 minutes.
Yes.
You are surprised?
No, yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm grateful. Thank you, because we have another panelist, Inti Bertocchi, who will also speak about the project that he's doing, of course not alone, but in the city of Bologna, which I think fits very well to this idea that you have, Gesine, of a more holistic approach that is focused on community building and like having like different groups not posed against each other, but find like an approach that benefits all and doesn't like emphasize the different neediness or of different groups. Yeah, that was a bit clumsy how I said it, but Inti probably can explain his project better and also what the idea behind it is. Inti. And also you have like more or less 5 minutes. I know you have a presentation, so I would still ask you to not make it too long so that we can enter.
I will skip some slides. Okay, let's go. I share my screen.
Bye, Mark. Thank you.
Bye, Mark.
Bye-bye, good luck.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to show you an experience which is taking place in Bologna right now. And the name is, this project is Salus Space. And this adventure started in 2015 when the UIA program published the first call for proposals, where the general objective was to identify and test new solutions on sustainable urban development. And we chose the inclusion of migrants and refugees because it was a big challenge for us. So Salus Space, the main idea of this project is to convert a building, which was a former hospital, into a space for the community, a big, let's say, facility center, where the refugees live together with other families and they provide facilities. And so it's like a center for the city, open to the city. And we received the funding, so this is a direct funding, as you said, from the European Commission of 5 million euros. So important, very important funding. And the duration of the project was 3 years, but of course with COVID and other things, we finished last January this year. So we are just in the testing phase. And the consortium is very articulated. There are many partners from the let's say, third sector, organizations, cooperatives, social, cultural associations, but also universities and research centers. So there are many different fields of expertise, and the municipality was like the coordinator of the whole project. We started with a co-design activity since the beginning. We started from these buildings, so you can see the state of maintenance was very bad, dilapidated. There were problems of squatting, of vandalism. So the local neighborhood was very complaining about the situation. So that was the right chance to make also urban regeneration project. The consortium made up a very brilliant idea to create these multi-level facilities that includes housing, but also a restaurant and a theater and many laboratories for artistic and cultural activities and gardening and so on. So this is a layout of the final master plan. And so, as you can see, the building was demolished because it was very complicated to make a refurbishment of this building. So after many discussions, we decided to demolish and to create something new. And so there are different buildings. One is the residential one for co-housing, where refugees and Italian families live together. And this is a multifunctional building for restaurant, laboratories, and the theater. And this is more the cultural center, where there is a conference room, a co-working space for also elaborating new ideas about the future of the reception system. This is now the situation right now, because the multifunctional building is yet to be done. So we are now hosting the activities in temporary buildings. There are shipping containers, but the new buildings will be done next year. So the whole project will be completed by 2 years. At the moment, all activities are already running, so the whole ecosystem is working. So there are the people living there, there are the all activities running. At the center of this idea is the collaborative community, which means that there are different families living together, migrants and Italians, also students and workers from different ages, from different countries, and at least 40% is made by asylum seekers and migrants. So some of the apartments are devoted to humanitarian corridors or to reception system. Sorry. But most of the apartments are free for all citizens who want to experience a new way of living. So everybody can apply. We did a public call and interviews to choose people that were highly motivated, because the very important thing is to participate to this vision and idea of solidarity, of community. So the motivational part is very important. So the people who live here, they sign a collaborative living pact. It's not a contract, it's like a mutual agreement. They are involved in the management also of the activities. A few words about the governance, which is because I think it's very interesting. There is a temporary association made by the partners of the project who decided to go further on the management phase, and a community manager and a cultural mediator that have been selected in order to support the community in this process. And a strategic, let's say, a control room made by the municipality, the managers, and the community managers who made the main decisions. They say to take the decisions, but also a steering committee where all citizens and refugees can participate to propose ideas and to make the common decisions. No, so it's very important also these two levels, the operatives, let's say, control room, and the more participatory space for including all beneficiaries and all citizens. And of course, the municipality has an important role of supervision and monitoring, because we have to to draw a qualitative report for the European Commission at the end of this experience. So we have 2 years of testing. So we have to show that it's possible to achieve this very challenging project. The whole project is based on 2 documents that have been made in a participatory way. We have been working with reception centers, but also with co-housing and places where people live together to draw the values and the rules for the common living, for the co-living, so living together. And this is very important because everybody has to agree with this vision of Salus. They have to share the values. And if you can see this index of the Charter of Values, you can see some key words like welcoming, respect, active involvement, solidarity, mutual help, pluralism, and sustainability, of course, because the project must be self-sustainable. We don't have to ask for more public fundings. So that's why we are running all these economic activities. And the rules, of course, describe also this governance, the roles, the actors, who is doing what, and so on, and what are the rules for the inhabitants. Let me conclude with just a few pictures. These are the training activities that have been done during the project in the different fields. So the restaurant, the hostel, the workshops, the laboratories for artistic and different, of course, we wanted to provide skills and to do some capacity buildings, of course, to help people. And some of them have been involved also in the management of Salus Space. And the others have their own experience they can use for their life. So this was very interesting training for 100 people, more or less. And now there are some activities which are going together with the citizens. No? For example, this is the gardening activity, which is very successful. We are now a lot of also the cultural activities, the theater, they all involve the local inhabitants and associations. So it's going to be like a space for all the active citizens, and they can share the facilities, the space, and develop something useful for the community, for the city. And the refugees are part of this ecosystem. No? They work for the communities. There is a reciprocity and a collaboration between the refugees and the city. So this is the main idea that we want to show. If you like the website, you can see here saluspace.eu. And if you have any question, you can write me. This is my email address.
Thank you so much, Inti. There was already the request in the chat function that if you could share the presentation.
Yes.
Yes, and this is a very interesting project that you shared, because it also shows what is possible with direct funding, right? The Urban Innovative Action Program is one of the only direct funding. Just a second. And it's one of the only direct funding projects that we have, where it's really, where intercultural community space was created, as you have shown, and it's to show what is also possible if the money goes directly to the cities and not only to the via the national governments. So thank you very much for sharing this. But I would also like to come back and link a bit the three different panelists that are still with me here, because we have now seen that this is really possible with direct money, and Mark has also explained that the money needs to be used better, not that there needs to be more money. But if you think about this, Bologna is a big city and is able to do such applications that are quite complicated, that need a lot of staff. Eurocities is also an association of the larger cities. So the question would be, what kind of role can smaller municipalities and towns play, and how far do they have actually access to direct funding, and what is your ideas on this question? And I would also ask the audience in the room to actually participate in the discussion if they would like to, because I saw there are many that are also having a lot of expertise on this issue. Okay, thank you. Who wants to go first? Thank you, Inti. Katharina, yes.
Yeah, perhaps I can make a start on that question. And just allow me to first say congrats to Inti, because I was so impressed by your presentation and by that wonderful project. And I think it's such a good example of really bringing together different local stakeholders. I mean, we saw it in the beginning in your slides as well. And so really great example, and I really wish you all the best of luck with that still. And then to the question about smaller municipalities. I mean, indeed, it's sort of one of the tricky things about EU funding, and probably Inti has also experienced that firsthand, that it is quite a process to get there in the end. So it's definitely, yeah, I think what you said, Melissa, that it's also a question of time and resources and expertise on how to develop these proposals for funding. And then smaller municipalities do not have the same capacities as cities to actually get a foot in the door there. So I think what makes a lot of sense is really to also call for the simplification of the whole application process to get funding, to make it more inclusive, in a way also more democratic. So you can really make sure that smaller municipalities also have a reasonable chance and access to that funding. And I think specifically, and here I'm coming back to another question that I think was mentioned to me in the Q&A, but I think it's especially important to also enlarge programs such as UIA, the Urban Innovative Actions, and to really put a focus on that direct funding. But nevertheless, regardless of the complications with funding, what we can see also at Eurocities, although we represent the major cities, but for instance, with the Solidarity Cities initiative, we also have smaller municipalities that are very active. Just a couple of weeks ago, we actually welcomed the municipality of Aarland in Norway to become part of Solidarity Cities. And I think regardless of the size of the city, I think the openness and the readiness, you can see that across the board. So I think that's also something to keep in mind, that indeed, a lot of the time we hear about the bigger cities, but really it's also the municipalities and the regions that are keeping this agenda alive just as much.
Thank you, Katharina. And I see Gesine has raised her hand because she probably wants to say something, especially on this regard with the simplification of the application procedures for smaller towns.
Yeah, I mean, we hear very often that we need a simplification, and with people who are knowledgeable about practically, there are normally two possibilities or two roads, so to say, to do it. One would be that European institution would help smaller or medium-sized communities, municipalities to fill, so to say, to fill the forms. This is one possibility. The other could be that one would just have more trust into the municipalities and the experiences with, say, which have been made with smaller cities and municipalities when money has been given to citizens, was always that there was no tricks, but that they were very careful with the money. That means I think one should trust more the people and should of course require that they prove their expenses, but that one should be also more open if they just, let me say, have a certain margin of generally agreed money for integration per person or whatsoever, but then also an additional one if more special attempts are made for social or cultural or whatever integration, because I think this is a wonderful example which has been given in Bologna. If we try to prolong that into the whole community, this is a wonderful project, and you require in the application to live there, that the people would be committed, etc., etc. This is good, but not everybody is very committed, etc., etc. So one should try to find also an additional way for funding, for simple funding, for normal people, so to say, and to count with their interests, which is not always totally particularistic and egoistic, but which is, of course, existing. And so maybe a combination of help for the application, second, of letting a certain free room for trying to get money and just count on the legitimacy afterwards if you have if you have given the money and if you have received the money and then have to show what you have done with the money. All that could simplify it, but it is absolutely necessary that the simplification should not only required but really practically done, because otherwise we don't make any step further.
Thank you. We also have the audience participating in our discussion, and I would like to actually Nien Upkes from Utrecht also wrote that the Dutch government actually used a bit the example of Bologna and Utrecht in a way that they wanted to compulsively house homeless people in great numbers together with refugees, but not understanding that there was a way bigger and different idea behind the project in Utrecht and also the project probably in Bologna. So I would also like to pose this question to my panelists: in how far can we learn from these kind of like smaller projects, and how transferable are experiences, and how do you engage with the national government and then communicating what you have been doing? Because in a sense, it's good that some of the ideas that have been developed in the urban innovative actions are not only sticking to this one project and then are over, but the question would be a bit in how far is this policy transfer from these like specific projects possible? Yes, so who wants to answer that, or who has a point on it? Katharina, yes, go, please.
But I'm also happy if anyone else wants to go first. If not, then I can perhaps give a quick overview or go a little bit more into depth what we actually do at Eurocities, right? Because part of our work, of course, is the policy and advocacy focus. So pretty much what we've been talking about up until now. But then we also have a very strong mutual learning and policy transfer program. And this is really something that we do within the context of our working group on migration and integration, where I think now we have around 97 cities that are part of that working group, and where we organize capacity building for them. So pretty much mutual learning events where one city has a good practice that they want to present. So for instance, on housing, so I don't know, in Bologna is also part of the working group. So perhaps in the future we will see a presentation about your project, but then also other topics on labor market integration, on positive narratives on migration and integration as well. So we have one city that presents that, and then we really have a specific methodology by which we identify different elements of that good practice that can then be transferred to other cities within Europe. So this transfer element is quite strong in the whole methodology. And then we also follow up with the cities to see how those learnings, how those practices were then put into practice in the specific local context. And I think those exchanges and knowledge building and all of that, I think it really helps a lot, and we really do see changes on the local level. For instance, the different one-stop shops that are now really built across cities. And of course, that also comes from an exchange of how that works in practice and what needs to be considered and the challenges associated with that. And I think those programs, they really need to be strengthened as well. And we need to further develop our capacities to also bring cities together and to have that space to discuss and to develop all of that together.
Thank you.
May I ask a question to Katharina Bamberg?
Sure, and then I would afterwards, you can ask the question, and then afterwards I would really like to give the word to Inti to go into.
Then give first the word to Inti, and maybe afterwards I put the question, okay?
Inti, I also wanted to give you the chance to reply, because you were mentioned quite a lot, and also there was a question additionally, not only about the Urban Innovative Action Program and your specific project Salus, but also in a sense the question in how far the Italian cities are exchanging best practices and are in close collaboration and cooperation about these issues. Maybe you can also address this as a second point. Thank you. And afterwards we go to Gesina's question to Katharina.
Yes, yes. Bologna has an office which is in charge of making connections with the other cities at European and national level. So we have actually many good collaborations. And I must say that UIA program was also very effective in creating the connections and making a possibility to cities to exchange their experiences, because we had also many opportunities also within this program to meet other cities in Italy and also in Europe. No, it was very, very interesting, especially, for example, now they asked to be a part of Urbelac, which is another network also with South America, and to exchange also this kind of experiences. In Italy, of course, there are so many different political situations, so it depends much on the mayor, no, if they want to make a practical and concrete projects in collaboration with other cities. But in many occasions, I must say that the cultural and exchange and also best practices exchange is very good. So we did many connections to know also which other experiences in social integration there are, and try to combine them and to make something new, no? Combining the best practices that we have.
Thank you. Yes, and hopefully Bologna will also be part of the International Alliance of Safe Harbors soon, which we founded yesterday, and which the first cities in Italy invited by the mayor of Palermo and the mayor of Potsdam was yesterday initiated and signed. Fingers crossed. Now to Gesine, who wanted to, yes.
Yeah, I think you are totally right to make this propaganda, because this is really important that one has not only good practical local ideas, but that one does kind of prepare a collective action, because otherwise, if there is a critical mass, so to say, of cities who do that, it will impress the people and the public much more than if you have only pioneers. It's the same is true for your project, by the way. If you try to make children out of that project, that will help. But my question was, because I think this mutual learning and also the way of financing at the same time refugees and people, common people from the town, is, as I feel it, not well realized by what you told about the Netherlands project to bring together refugees and homeless people, because then you have two groups, you know, which are considered from the society as kind of pariah, right? And to bring them together, I think this is not a good idea. To bring together refugees with normal people around, this is much better. And I have studied in the last months a little bit what happens in Africa and also in African towns. And these African towns have very often very similar challenges and very similar experiences. One point is also, for instance, in order to dissolve these big camps you have in Africa and make out of that not a provocative location, so to say, but really to proceed to an integration, they do the same. They try to finance institutions or buildings or whatsoever, which can be used by everybody. So, but everybody, I think this idea is important. And my question is, how much, I think we had common conferences, Eurocities, with African cities. how much do you cooperate in that sense also with Africa? Because this has an indirect impact on the whole migration flow. So this, I would be very interested to hear about that.
Shall I go ahead straight away, or?
Yes, sure. Yeah, we can go, and then I see what questions are still left.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot for the question. And I think also very important dimension to bring into this whole discussion, because I feel like a lot of the time we do have a sort of Eurocentric view on these issues, right? And obviously there are, as you said, similar concerns, but then also additional concerns in African cities about the issue of migration, integration, both when it comes to emigration, but then also when it comes to immigration of people. Now for Eurocities and our cooperation, I must say at this moment, we do focus a lot on the EU policy context, simply also because our time and resources are limited as well. But as much as we can, and on an ad hoc basis as well, we do try to link up, of course, also beyond our membership. And this is not just for cities in Africa, of course, but then also for cities in Turkey, for instance. And I think it was around 2 weeks ago now that our president, who's the mayor of Florence, Dario Nardella, he actually went to Istanbul to also connect with the mayor of Istanbul on the issue of migration and integration.
Good guy.
Sorry?
Good guy. He's a good guy.
I can only agree. No, definitely. What we're looking into now, and this is still in the making, but what we would really like to do is to have a high-level conference at some point next year on the topic of migration and integration, and also bring in those cities outside of Europe, or just at the border of Europe, as Istanbul, of course, is located within Europe. And also bring in other cities from outside Europe to really discuss about this issue in a more comprehensive way, and to really also get different input, get different points of view as well. And of course, next to Eurocities, I mean, we're not the only one working on that issue. And I would also really like to recommend that you check out a project that's called MC2CM, which is actually implemented by the International Center for Migration, International Center for Policy Development on Migration, ICMPD. And they actually have this project where they work together with different cities around the Mediterranean, right? So cities in North Africa, as well as cities, for instance, in Italy and Spain. And so there are definitely spaces like that. And of course, next to the work that we do with Eurocities, I would also really advocate for having more of these projects, and really also building those connections across the Mediterranean, but then also further afar as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think that was also a very important point yesterday in the founding of the alliance, in the name, that it's an international alliance and it's not a European alliance, because to basically get away a bit from this Eurocentric focus, and also see that, of course, what is Europe as a political and a cultural idea is way more than what the cities and countries are that are currently in the European Union. I don't have any questions from the audience, and these last 15 minutes were actually reserved. I think I forgot in the beginning to mention this, for questions from the audience. We already discussed some of your questions, but I would still ask you, if you have questions also specifically to one of the panelists, or if you want to know a bit more about Inti's project, please post your questions in the chat. If not, I would continue with the question. We only have like 15 minutes left, but please just post them. And meanwhile, I would ask the panelists to also, how do you see, because that's often a problem if you say we want to have more money, the direct funding is very important, or also the difficulty of making more relocation possible with more resources, then often there comes this issue of the framing. It's like difficult to say more money for more refugees, but it's also the question what would be a good way of framing and answering this question of direct funding, of more money, because it is somehow needed to provide the social infrastructure for reception and for inclusion. But maybe a point, yes, Gesine, you can answer this directly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the framing could be to connect these ideas to the sustainability goals, because this is also an international dimension. And I think one should a little bit overcome the idea that the integration point is the integration of refugees or foreigners. Integration is a general social challenge. Even if there is no foreigner, you have to integrate a city with various generations, etc. And if you connect this whole challenge to the sustainability goals, you also can make out of that or take in, I would say, the dimension of future planning. You spoke about urban planning or urban development. The integration of refugees is also an element of urban development on the demographic level, but also on the cultural, economic, whatsoever level. And so I would say it would be good to institutionalize the welcome of refugees and also, of course, the financing into the general development of a location, of a municipality or whatsoever, and to include in the preparation of this development not only elected people, not only people from the administration of the city, but to have a forum just oriented towards development, general lines of development, which also include NGOs and the private sector or the companies. The final decision should be made by those who are elected, because there, I think, should lay the legitimacy of a representative democracy. But if you have such a forum, also maybe include people from humanities or from universities, which could give advice how to develop. If you have such a kind of integrating view of integration, then I think one can strengthen the idea you have already put forward also in your project, Inti, with the integration of refugees and normal people from Bologna.
Yes, okay, thank you. I have one, I don't know, does anyone want to react before we go from a question in the audience? I mean, if I would repose this a bit, the last time that we spoke about direct funding in a panel with these city mayor of Marburg, he made a very strong point that he said, we don't engage in the Safe Harbor Alliance because we need more money or doing something. We stand for our community values, we stand for fundamental rights, we stand for human rights approach, and we are ashamed of Europe and how Europe is dealing with the question of migration. The mayor of Rottenburg has also made a statement in one of the big German newspapers today in a similar vein, but they have said, of course, there's always a bit of the difficulty that if they say they want to receive more refugees and they are willing to do this, then the central government often says, yeah, but if you then do it, you ask us for the money. So one big advantage that would come from the direct funding from the European Union would, of course, be to strengthen this kind of advocacy role that cities have, because they would then see this as a European project and as a European task, but wouldn't have to go to the central governments that are often really opposed or for political reasons are trying to exploit anti-migrant sentiment. Is this something, Katharina, that also plays a role in this kind of like advocacy for direct funding for Eurocities, or how would you frame and address this issue of direct funding and why it is important?
No, thanks for the question. And I think you pretty much said it all already. So I could probably agree with you on that. But something that I was thinking about just now when we were talking about, and when Gesine also mentioned the different stakeholders at the local level that sort of come together to also form that message and to frame that narrative. I think what we also need to mention is just making sure that city administrations are themselves also becoming more diverse and more inclusive, right? And I think there's a couple of different ways of doing that, and also making sure that we're, not giving, so to say, a voice to migrants and refugees, but we're providing a stage for that voice to be heard, right? There's also a little bit of a difference there. But so there are different ways of doing that. And a lot of cities now, they've also installed migrant councils. So really councils that, of course, bring together different people with a different migration story, so to say, and that really also have an input on the policies and on the strategy that the city councils put forward. So that's one thing that, of course, can be done to really bring in that perspective as a focus as well. And then another thing that I would like to mention, one charter or one document that's quite important for us at Eurocities is our Integrating Cities Charter, which is sort of the backbone to all of the work we do on migration and integration policies, but then also our projects in that respect. And that charter, it sort of harnesses the responsibilities and the duties of cities. And one of those points is also that cities have a responsibility as employers, as well as contractors of public services, right? So there are different layers and dimensions to that again, but when we speak to the cities that are part of that charter, we really see that there's a lot of movement and a lot of really progress on trying to make city administrations more diverse themselves, and not just in terms of employees or in like the lower levels, but also in the management levels, and really trying to make sure that the city really does speak to different parts of a diverse society. So I think that's really also super important when we talk about narratives, that we really put that as a very, very big focus.
Thank you. And that links well also to what Gesine said, in a more post-migrant society, there are like different solidarities, and they need to be built across like different groups that are on the outside or on the margins of society. And I want to give Inti, because I'm always tend as a moderator to give like own points as well, so I'm trying to do it a little bit less. And I think Inti, Katharina and Gesine, I would give you the chance, because we still don't have more questions from the audience, to basically wrap this up, make a last comment which you think is important, or react to some of the issues raised that we didn't go into detail. And I would start with Inti, and maybe do like 2 or 3 minutes for final statements. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, I don't have a big experience in direct funding, because my colleagues from the international relations are more into this topic. But from my experience, I really appreciate this project because it was really a big opportunity to grow our experience, to learn from other cities, and to collect the best ideas. And because the national government sometimes it doesn't give us the chance to risk something, to do something risky, to do something which is challenging. But this really was an opportunity to do something completely new, very challenging, and this was really thanks to the direct fundings. Otherwise, it was not possible to do that, and I really appreciate this possibility.
Thank you, Inti. Then Gesine, last words or reaction? You're still muted. Sorry, you have to unmute yourself.
I think what you said, Inti, is very true, and it is valid for all the cities over the world, namely that they are more inclined to innovation and to risky decision-making than national states, because they are generally, this is at least my experience for the last 10 years, they are much more solution-oriented than the level of the national state, which politically speaking or politologically speaking, are mostly interested in getting power and keeping it. I don't say that for moral reasons, but this is the logic of their handling. They are not pressed by the situation and by the challenges which are pressing on the local politicians. They have to find solutions. It's not always the case. See that in the European Union, they can live for years without finding a solution, and that doesn't disturb them. Also because the power they have doesn't come from these problems, but from another level. So I think this is very, very important to stress that the innovation which we really urgently need does come from that level. very clearly.
Yes, thank you. Very strong statement again on mayors have to find solutions where national governments fail. I think that was a similar comment earlier in the chat. And last words then going to Katharina for last statements and wrap up of our discussion.
Yeah, I mean, what I would mention in a couple of last words is really that I think just with conferences like this, I think we can be quite positive about the leadership that we see on the local level. I think it's really positive also the links that can be built between city administrations and civil society, as well as, for instance, the private sector as well, and the economy. So there's really, I think, a big point to be made about alliance building and really trying to bring our point across with different stakeholders involved. So that's one thing that I would stress. And then I think another thing is also that, again, we really need to be aware and harness the structures when it comes to multi-level governance. So I think it's of course one thing to make sure that the local level really takes a leadership role, but of course that has to be sort of put in the format of cooperation with the different levels. Otherwise, simply because of the nature of EU law and national law, is going to be tricky, right? So I think just keeping a realistic point about that makes sense, and just trying to find those spaces where those points are heard. And I hope that today was perhaps one of those, and I'm super happy I could be part of it.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful last words, and taken very seriously as well to really connect to the different levels and make the positions clear, which is clearly an advocating and lobby role that cities probably have to take more. And I think that was also a goal from the conference, from the Sea to the City, that cities with the voices become more visible and stand for a different migration policy in Europe, where cities are at the center, where human rights are at the center. And I think all the cities have shown that they're really upholding human rights and fundamental laws. And there's a lot of innovative projects, as we saw in Bologna on the ground. Mayors have to find solutions, and they take up the leadership role, as we saw in this conference. I'm very happy that you were here with me and brought all these very, very excellent expertise to the discussion. Thank you very much, and please stay with us. We have a lunch break, but the next panel on arriving from the sea to the city for concrete corridors of solidarity will start at 2 o'clock in the Zoom link that was just posted in the chat, but it's also on the Facebook and on the website of From the Sea to the City. If you haven't received the link, please register, and for the ones that are leaving us and enjoying their Saturday afternoon, I wish you a wonderful weekend, and thank you very much. See you around. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.